What is Freemasonry? Why is it so dangerous? And most importantly, how can we protect our loved ones from entering the craft? Stay with us. Catholic Parents Online is next. Hello and welcome to Catholic Parents Online, a program where we explore the issues Catholic parents face while raising their children. I'm your host, Colleen Perfect. We've all heard the terms One World Order, New Age Movement, and New World Order. But did you know about their connection with Freemasonry? Joining me again to help unveil the truth about Freemasonry is Mary Therese Hellmuller. Mary is a nurse specializing in critical care, and she is also a certified legal nurse consultant. She is the founder and CEO of Guadalupe Travel Incorporated, providing pilgrimages to Our Lady of Guadalupe in Mexico City for the past 24 years. Mary speaks the Spanish language fluently and has worked in the missions of Brazil, Mexico, and Guatemala. I'm very grateful to Mary Therese for her willingness to share her wealth of knowledge on the secret society called Freemasonry. Thank you so much for being here, Mary.
Thank you for inviting me. It's a privilege.
Oh, I'm very grateful you're here.
It's an honor.
And we do have a lot to cover, so I'm going to start right
do.
out by asking you just what is Freemasonry?
Well, Freemasonry, just briefly, a brief description of it, is that it's the largest international secret society. It claims that it embraces all different types of religions and faiths, only secretly to negate them, nullify them, and actually destroy them. Their basic principle is naturalism. That's their doctrine.
Could you explain what naturalism is?
Naturalism is human nature. They believe human nature and human reason should rule all things, should be the judge and measure of all things. So that leaves out God, it leaves out divine intervention, it leaves out any kind of inspiration, divine inspiration. So basically what they are doing is leaving God out. They're putting themselves up as God, or as gods, so to speak. So basically, logically, the order is, if man is the judge and ruler of all things, then there is no God. So, and then it is, man is God. That's how it progresses in Freemasonry. So it is a diabolical religion, and that man is God is the old ancient deception of Satan, of Lucifer from the very beginning.
Right.
So when that is proclaimed and when that is believed, then it unleashes all kinds of things. Just a lust of money, a lust of power, a lust of sex. I mean, just unleashes an unbelievable amount of evil. So Freemasonry is dangerous, and it is international, and it is an organization, a religion that is out to rule the world. Its main goal is to destroy the Catholic Church and Christian societies, socioeconomic societies, and replace them with a social structure that is based on naturalism. So their goal is one world order, and their main communication is called the New Age, and the highest level in the Scottish Rite is the 33rd degree level, and that's called the New Age. And I remember back in college, I was seeing these terms, New Age, New Age movement. I didn't know what it was about, but I knew something was terribly wrong. And it wasn't until traveling all over the world and studying history of the different revolutions that have taken place that I realized the influence of Masonry and who is behind the one world government, the one world order, the New World Order, the New Age movement. It's all the code words for Freemasonry. So are there good people that belong in Freemasonry? I believe they come to Freemasonry many times because maybe they need a fraternity, or they need some brotherly love, like they like to quote, and like they so much all over the internet and many of the publications, they like to say it's a brotherly fraternity. And
they do
so
so
I do,
much good work.
and they do, yes, the Shriners Hospitals. But all of that is a smoke screen, and that is to, in the outer level, like for us, to make it look like it is good, and to screen it from what it really is. It is a diabolical, satanic religion, with many of its ceremonies and practices just outrightly invoking and chanting Satan. So it is very frightening. There were good people. If you go online, and you know, Freemasons like to say that George Washington was a Mason.
Yeah, I've heard that.
Benjamin Franklin was a Mason. But you will never hear them claim that also Lenin was a Mason. Karl Marx was a Mason. Trotsky was a Mason. Mussolini was a Mason. And also the ruler in Mexico during the Great Persecution was President Calles, a Mason. So, I mean, you could go down the list, you know, and then the Freemasons will say, well, there's always good and bad in every religion and every cult, you know, in every society. But the difference is the Masons, Lenin, Stalin, Karl Marx, all these people were actually living up to what Masonry teaches, what Masonry is. Pure naturalism. God is man, and it unleashes a terrible persecution upon the Catholic Church, which is one of their main goals, is to destroy the Catholic Church. So that is the reason why the popes over the years have made statements and documents. There's about 17 main principal documents written about Freemasonry, the dangers of Freemasonry, and also it is a grave mortal sin to join the Freemasonry. So in light of that, because it is diabolical in nature and man is not God.
Well, Mary, if it's a secret society, how do you know so much about it? How did
It
you
is
learn
amazing.
about it?
It is amazing. I must say, it is very amazing. There's
I know there's a lot out there on the internet about it, but it's only what they want you to read.
And many times that is the case.
Right.
However, in traveling, it was so interesting because going to Mexico and bringing pilgrimages for over 25 years, you know, in Mexico, and then also I conducted pilgrimages in France and Ireland, and all the different various countries. And it was very interesting because you study the history and you study the revolutions, and one was the same. It was like I could repeat word for word what would happen next, what happened, what happened, what happened, just by knowing the history of what happened in Mexico. And so I said, okay, I know that the author of these revolutions was Satan, was Lucifer, definitely, but what political organization is behind this, because it is so orchestrated. It can't be by chance. It just can't be by chance. It is so orchestrated and so similar, whether you're talking about France, Spain, what happened in Italy, what happened in Russia, what happened in Mexico. It was just, it's so widespread. And so I started on a little search, and with Mexico, you know, asking people, you know, about their government, and also in Ireland and all these other countries when I'd visit. And there was a lot of fear amongst the people when they would talk about Freemasonry as the background of this. So it's not just me that's saying this. This is people in their own countries that are saying that Freemasonry is the basis of these revolutions. And when you look at it, what does a Masonic revolution look like? It looks like the revolution, the French Revolution. It looks like the Spanish Revolution. It looks like the Mexico Revolution. It looks like what happened in Russia. I mean, people don't realize, they haven't studied the history. No. And so that's what got my curiosity up. And so looking into Mexico, what happened? Mexico, you know, when it was founded under Catholic Spain, it had the first printing press. It had the first university long before Yale, long before even the United States was founded. Amazing. Natural resources, wealthy country. Why did that not become a superpower?
Yes.
Why? Because they were well on the way, as far as intellectually and all their natural resources. Well, when Mexico separated from Spain in 1810, from the time of 1810 up until the reform laws of Benito Juarez, there was one coup after another, one bloodbath, one assassination. When you study the Mexican history, there was so much unpeace and unsettlement throughout the country. And when the reform laws came, that was really the Masonic laws coming into place into Mexico. And then it was the Constitution of 1917 in Mexico and the coming of Plutarco Calles that ruled Mexico in the 1920s. And he was so brutal, they said he was a mixture between Stalin and Lenin.
Wow.
In his persecution that he unleashed against the Catholics. And to give you an idea, of this persecution, what they did is they would, when they came into Mexico, into the government, they made marriage, they would not recognize marriages by church weddings. Oh. You had to be married by the JP. They do not, and to this day, they do not recognize church weddings. People don't realize, okay? So what else happened? They brought in pornography. They brought in sex education into the schools to demoralize the youth and to take control of the minds of the youth. It's very interesting to read several of the books of people who had fled Mexico during the persecution. Some of these books called No God Next Door, Blood-Drenched Altars, Mexican Martyrdom. It was fascinating when I picked up these books. And by the way, what validated it for me in many sense was in 1991, it was still illegal to carry blood-drenched altars, which was the history of Mexico and the Masonic Revolution, on you.
Really?
If you were found to have this book on you in Mexico, you could be thrown in jail.
Oh my heavens.
In 1991.
Wow, that wasn't that
Right.
long ago.
And so even up until 1991, it was illegal for the priests to wear the Roman collars. So there were so many laws that were enacted. The government took over schools, took over health care. So the nationalized health care, public school system. They totally wiped out the private schools of the religious orders there in Mexico. They closed the churches. People were martyred if they were found practicing their faith. And in fact, one church in Mexico City, people were gathered for Mass. The army came in and just fired and shot everybody. Oh. So it was very brutal. It was really Satan unleashed in Mexico. And many Americans do not realize the great persecution that took place in the early 1920s up till about 1945 in Mexico, and it was the Masonic Revolution. So this is what Masonry looks like: intolerance for the Catholic Church, wanting to destroy the Catholic Church.
Patrice, who would say, if they don't know it's the Freemasons doing that, who would say, what would they say? It's just the government?
The government. You know, that's a good question, Colleen. You know, I have a lot of friends who will say, well, look, Mexico, you know, the population is primarily Catholic. Look at how corrupt it is, so it's the Catholic Church. No, it is not the Catholic Church that runs Mexico. It is the Freemasons that run Mexico. You have to be a Mason to even hold office in Mexico.
Yeah. It's obvious
so
if the Catholic Church was running it, they wouldn't be closing Catholic schools, and they wouldn't say you
but,
can't get married in a church.
But most of the world, most of society here does not even know of that persecution that took place in Mexico, and they do not know that history. So, yes, it is run by the Masons in Mexico, yet to this day. So it's only since 1991 that some of the laws have been lifted, and it's been since the Holy Father Pope John Paul II had made a few visits to Mexico. And in fact, that was the first pope that ever came to Mexico. And before that time, Mexico had broken ties completely with the Vatican for over like 125 years. Wow. So it was very anti-Catholic and still remains anti-Catholic to a certain point. Give you an idea, I want to share a few stories of some of my heroes in Mexico and the martyrs. And one is a little boy, Jose Luis. He was 10 years old. And he was helping the Cristeros. The Cristeros was a movement that was fighting. They were fighting this, the government and this religious persecution. So it was men of great honor and faith that were hiding in the hills. And so this little boy, Jose Luis went into the hills and talked to the general and said, please let me join you. I want to be a part of this movement. And the general said, no, you're much too young. A boy cannot serve in this. It's too dangerous. And he pleaded with the general until the general finally gave in and said, okay, I'll give you the job of watering the horses, taking care of our horses. So Jose Luis was so excited and so proud of this position that he held, that he was helping the Cristeros, the men who were defending the faith in Mexico. So what happens one day, the whole army is taken by the government officials, by the police in Mexico. The Cristeros are martyred, but little Jose Luis, they didn't know what to do. He was a boy, he was 10 years old. And so they put him in prison. And in this little town in the northern section of Mexico, the governor was actually the godfather of little Jose Luis. But nonetheless, the godfather was also a Mason, and he would come in every day into prison and say, you deny Christ the King. See, they have a problem with the authority of Christ the King because man is God. Man is king, man rules, man is the judge, the supreme judge. So the little boy would not deny Christ the King. And so one day, Godfather came in and said, you deny Christ the King. Little boy would not. They burned the skin off the feet of the little boy. Oh. They made him walk through the town, his mother behind. Oh. They made him dig his grave, stand in front of his grave, in front of a firing squad, and they said, you deny Christ the King. But before you heard the shots, you heard the mother crying over the crowd, son, never deny Christ the King, for a crown of glory waits for you in heaven. And with that, they shot him. Oh, this is the brutality. It was not just, I mean, it was bad enough, priests and religious in Mexico. No, many laity, millions of people would not give up their faith in Mexico, and they were martyred. We'll never know how many saints and martyrs are there in Mexico. So this is actually a Masonic government unleashed in its purest form. And so you also have the story of another hero of mine, which is Padre Pro. And his feast day is coming up November 23rd. And Padre Pro is a beautiful example of someone who would not deny Christ the King and who would persevere in his faith. So this priest, he was exiled as a seminarian and actually ordained in Belgium. But he was sent back to Mexico because he was so poor in health that his officials thought that, oh, going back home, seeing his family, getting back to his home country would restore his health. Little did they really know what was happening in Mexico at that time because it was illegal to practice your faith. The churches were closed, the schools were closed. You know, it was the Masonic Revolution. So anyways, Padre Pro enters the U.S. secretly, disguised, and he administers to people for about a good year and a half. And he would take different costumes. He'd disguise himself one time as a street in Mexico City. He would have communion stations where he would go and he would, give the Holy Communion to the Catholics. He would also celebrate Mass in secret places. And he was so witty and so humorous in many of the time, in the ways that he would do this. He outwitted the police, that it made the police look foolish in Mexico, and it made Calles extremely angry, extremely angry, because it was making a fool out of the government, because he would escape each time, and he'd have a different disguise. So he's one of my heroes in Mexico. Eventually he was captured, and he was martyred. He was shot before a firing squad, and he was only 2 years a priest, basically, and just about a year and a half in Mexico, back in his home country. But nonetheless, when he was in prison, he had the prisoners singing Viva Cristo Rey, songs to Our Lady, to our Lord. They wrote on the walls, Viva Cristo Rey. He heard the last confessions of many of the prisoners there. And then when he was brought out to the firing squad, he held out his arms and said, Viva Cristo Rey. and he fell in the sign of a cross.
Oh.
See, he's a beautiful example of that time of the martyrs of Mexico and the strength to withstand this Masonic government. So learning and studying about this government, then, I was taking pilgrimages to Ireland, and I couldn't believe what I was hearing again. But it was in a different way. It was the potato famine, and it was, the Irish, were starving because the potato famine failed. And I went, wait a minute, you don't live on a potato. And I just started thinking, no, the only person I know that could live on a potato was St. John Vianney. so anyways, nonetheless, that got me going and asking questions. And so in Killarney, I took a little buggy ride. I would ask different guides and different people, about the history and what happened during the potato famine and the persecution, the religious persecution in Ireland. And it's always the same feeling, this hush up. Well, let's go where there's nobody can hear us. Let's go to the woods. Let's go to the mountains. Let's go, somewhere where nobody can hear us. So there was that real fear element. Yeah. It was very interesting. And they all came with the same answer. It was the Masonic influence in the persecution in Ireland. There was food in Ireland, and that's well documented now, of course. There was plenty of food, but it was being shipped over to England. And you could have the food and you could have the meat if you denied your faith. Kind of like in Mexico. You deny Christ the King. No. So the Irish said no to that. So they died in the millions. I mean, we'll never know either, all the martyrs of Ireland.
Those are my ancestors.
I know, and it's beautiful. Ireland, it's a beautiful heritage. But, it's again, a land of saints and martyrs for the faith. Right. And so instead of giving up their faith, they died. They were eating grass or eating whatever they could, but they were starving. So it was very interesting because some of the older people that I talked to in Killarney and other places in Ireland, they'd say, yes, they said there was food in the main squares and the main areas, and today they even have the names, the Catholic names, the people that gave up their faith are called the supers. It's very interesting because they took the soup, they took the meat and the soup, they denied their faith. So they're still known as the supers. It's very interesting, as far as the history of what happened there. But it is documented today that there was plenty of food in Ireland, and that was a genocide.
Of course.
Isn't that interesting? And then it even brought it closer when I went to Northern Ireland. In Southern Ireland, I didn't see any Masonic lodges. As soon as I got into Armagh, which is like the main city in Northern Ireland, one of the main cities in Northern Ireland, you're greeted with an archway with all the Masonic symbols. So it's very interesting because you have the skull and bones, you have the G, you have all the different Masonic symbols. And as a group on a pilgrimage, we would go into a restaurant, and that restaurant was so fearful of us because we were Catholics and our priests had Roman collars on. They locked the doors.
Oh my goodness,
for us.
Really?
And this was just a few years back. This was maybe at the most 10 years ago in Northern Ireland.
Really?
And they were trying to protect us. So it became very clear to me the struggle isn't so much Protestant Catholicism, it is Freemasonry.
Yes.
And what that means and how that unleashes against Catholicism. Because the people in the restaurant were trying to protect us by locking us in. Isn't that very interesting?
That is
and that's just 10 years ago. But I wouldn't know this information without talking or without visiting these places and asking questions and studying the history and visiting the people.
Undercover investigator, weren't you?
So the same story is told over and over and over with these religious persecutions. And it is the church is closed, is outlawed, the priests are hung, they are shot. Many of the sisters in religious were guillotined in the French Revolution. And the cry in the French Revolution, which people aren't really familiar with, was to overthrow the crown and the altar. So the altar was Catholicism.
Okay, sure.
So then the cry for the Catholics was all for the crown or all for the altar, So, but many people were martyred in the French Revolution in the same way, and how you can read about it in the life of St. John Vianney. And that's reading his big life. It's a big book like this. Get a hold of that, and it goes through what it was like in the Masonic Revolution, the French Revolution. So it's very interesting to study history, and you can easily, I started putting pieces together, and I couldn't believe what I was seeing. There was a common thread. It's the common denominator. It cannot be denied.
No.
But of course, it's not being taught.
No. Well, people are fearful.
So, and very fearful about speaking out. In fact, I had people here, you know, in other states when they knew we were doing this program. They said, "Aren't you afraid?"
Yeah, of course. That's why I'm so grateful to you too.
Yes, and different religious orders that are praying at this very moment for us, for our safety. So it is nothing, you know, to play with, the Masonic,
No.
you know,
But
lodge.
it has to be told.
It has to be told.
It's demonic, and the devil is deceptive, and we are going to
Right.
expose it.
Right.
That's what we're
Exactly.
about too. Catholic Parents Online is
Right.
about the truth.
Right, and the only way that really can protect yourself is to really know your enemy.
That's right.
I don't like to give a lot of time to the occult, because this is really what it is.
Right.
This is the occult. And I don't like to give a lot of time, but people need to know the basics
Exactly.
in order to protect themselves and their families.
Yes. And we have so much more to cover. That's why we decided to do 2 shows on this, which is excellent because you have so much more to tell us.
Yes, I do.
So
Yes.
people will be filled in on a lot more details.
Right.
So Mary, thank you again. I know
Thank
this
you
is not
so
easy.
much.
And,
No,
and
it's
we
difficult to talk about. There's
we,
so much.
We have prayed, and we've prayed to St. Michael, and
Yes.
we're just going to keep ourselves steeped in prayer and holy water.
Thank you. Thank you, Colleen.
Thank you. God bless you.
God bless you.
This has been an amazing and revealing program on Freemasonry. I'm sure you won't want to miss part 2, where we will look at the history and the structure of Freemasonry, its symbols, the first 3 oaths members must take, a Masonic document called the Alta Vendita, and the New Age and One World Order. Most importantly, we will learn how we can protect ourselves and our families. Thanks for watching, and God bless you and yours.